Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Hello, everybody. Thais Sky here. Welcome to the podcast. I am your host. Maybe that's obvious because I'm the one that's talking. Well, anyway, doesn't matter. Hi. I have an interesting episode for you all today. Interesting in that I haven't really done this, but I've had some amazing guests over the past years talking about entrepreneurship, but I never dedicated an episode where I talk to you all about entrepreneurship. And I just think it's time. It's time because I have many thoughts. And because I'm not a business coach, I don't usually talk about this stuff. But I figured it may be helpful for you all if you are thinking about going into entrepreneurship or in the beginnings of starting your own coaching business, it may be helpful to just hear some thoughts from a veteran. So even though I'm not a business coach, I've built my own business. And so I know a thing or two about what it takes to run a business. And I have many thoughts I want to share with you. And also, if you hear squeaking in the background, that would be my dog. And the perfect timing, as always, to start squeaking his toy. Okay. So just to preface about why I have any authority on this subject, I've been running my business since 2011. I started as a health coach, believe it or not, and then transitioned to life coach soon after that. And I've been working. Oh my gosh, my dog is going to drive me crazy. Yeah, you. He's just looking at me, y'all. It's very cute. Okay, but if you're looking at me, you can't be squeaking, so that's good. Okay, so running my business in different variations since 2011, but June of 2015 is when I made the big leap, moved to Los Angeles, and started my business full-time. So I've been in business full-time for 4.5 years, and I have made all of the income in the past 4.5 years through my business with a little help of a side business I ran for, I think, a year and a half, a couple years ago. So most of my income comes from my business. I have never done anything else but this since 2015. So again, I think I know a thing or two about entrepreneurship. And one of the most important things that I've learned over the years that I want to make sure all of you kind of leave with and digest and munch on and consider is that entrepreneurship is about process, and process is what equals progress. So what I mean by process is that when I first started running my own business, I thought that once I got to a certain, once I launched a product, a program out into the world, that was it. And however well that product program did, that was it. And then I would move on to the next. But what I've learned is that actually entrepreneurship is about learning how to adjust, how to make tweaks, how to read your audience, how to read your gut, how to make quick decisions, how to figure things out in the moment. There's a lot of that in the momentness about entrepreneurship. It's not just a one and done. It's not you launch and then you have this perfect launch strategy and then it's online. No, the launch itself requires so much changing your mind, changing how you approach it, thinking about this differently, saying it differently. It's a lot. It requires a lot of flexibility, a lot of openness to being attuned to what you're receiving and making something out of that. It's not a one and done. Now Chewy is doing the thing that dogs do where they scratch at the pillow in order to create the perfect little circle, and then he just plops down. It's not a one and done here, folks. And that's really important to be keeping in mind because I was under the impression that it was a one and done. And I was under the impression that once I come up with my brand, I never had to change it. I looked at people like Danielle Laporte and Gabby Bernstein and Marie Forleo, and I figured that they just had it. They don't have it. They are constantly tweaking and changing and plotting and thinking and strategizing. And so can you. You are allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to explore and differentiate and figure things out. And as you do so, eventually you are going to land into what works for you. I'm finally at that place that I found what really works for me. I know exactly who my niche is. I know exactly who the type of women that I enjoy working with. I know exactly the type of content I like to generate. I know who I am online, but that's taken 4.5 years of giving myself a lot of permission to change my mind. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I started as a health coach. Then I was a life coach. Then I did a stint of business coaching. Then I was back to life coaching. At one point, I called myself an activist coach, not because I worked with activists, as that would be the more appropriate name, but because I believed in soul activation. And so I called myself an activist coach. That lasted about a month until I realized that that was not only appropriative of like actual activism, but also that it was very misleading and misguiding, and people don't really know what an activist coach is. I mean, my little motto or mantra or byline on my website has changed so many times. And for a long period of time, I thought that once I got that right mantra, that right business byline, then everything else would come together. And that's just not the way it worked out for me. For me, it was a consistent evolution of continually showing up and playing with what felt good for me. And that's why cultivating intuition is such an important part of being an entrepreneur. It's why entrepreneurship is one of the greatest spiritual endeavors that we can ever do, because it forces us to really learn how to trust something bigger than us, to trust the timing of our lives, and to really deepen into our relationship with our intuition and what feels right. When we're the CEO of our own company, no one is going to tell us what to do. And that's amazing, because it means that you get to now use all of the lessons that you've learned to cultivate a deep trust that you know what's right for you. You know what's best for you. And part of that trust, honestly, comes with time and practice. You don't have to have a perfect product to get it out in the world. In fact, when I first started Worthy Women Rise, many of you may remember this, but before it was Worthy Women Rise, it was called Own Your Spotlight. And Own Your Spotlight was a course on visibility and self-expression. And the more I did that, the more I slowly tweaked and changed the program to the point that it didn't make sense to call it Own Your Spotlight anymore, and it shifted to Worthy Women Rise. So much of the content remained the same, but the way I packaged it, the way I understood it and conceptualized it changed, and that changed because I kept running it. You know, this upcoming launch that I'm doing of Worthy Women Rise in February, this will be my 8th time, I believe, or 9th time running this program. It's a long time coming. A lot of adjustments have been made. Okay, so number one, remember, it's about process. It's about trusting your process, knowing that it's not a one and done, giving yourself permission to change your mind. Okay. The next kind of big thing that I've learned over the years is that money is simply not a measure of success. So when you see coaches telling you how much they make, that doesn't really truly tell you much. You don't know how much seed money they started with. You don't know what type of support they had. You don't know if they're completely invested, let's say through their significant other. You don't know if they started from zero. So I know that in our culture, how much money someone makes is equal to their worth in the world, but that's capitalism. That's not facts. What's actually true is that money is only a measure of money. It's a measure of revenue. It doesn't really say much about anything else, especially about success. That's not to say that money is no use as a metric. Of course it can be useful. If you wanted a launch to be $10,000 and the launch was actually $1,000, that's an important metric. It tells you that maybe there should have been some tweaks made, some things changed, maybe the product needed to be positioned differently. There's a lot you can learn from that. But it's not a measure of success. It's not a measure of your worth. It doesn't determine whether the work you're doing is valid and important in the world. I know so many successful, incredible, high money-making people who like from the outside look like they have this incredible life, but then when you go in, you realize that they're unhappy and they're quite miserable and that they don't really like what they're doing. It's not a measure of success in any meaningful way, because money is not a measure in any meaningful way. Just like the weight on our bodies is not a measure of anything truly meaningful. The weight of your body, like if you were to weigh your arm, what would you learn about yourself? Would you learn anything? You would just learn that your arm weighs whatever, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever an arm is supposed to weigh. But it doesn't say anything, does it? We don't know how much an arm really is supposed to weigh. That's the same thing with our bodies. Who determines how much our bodies should or should not weigh? The BMI index is an antiquated, old school model that doesn't actually give us any information that's useful. The weight on your body does not say anything about you except the gravitational pull. That's it. That's all it tells you. If you go to a different planet, your weight is going to be different. Again, it doesn't say anything about you. Money, how much money you make, does not say anything about you as an entrepreneur. I did not make 6 figures in 6 months like I had anticipated when I first started coaching. I really wanted to make 6 figures in 6 months. It didn't work out for me. In fact, it didn't work out for me for year 1, year 2, year 3. That's just not how my business unfolded. That's not to say that my business has not been a tremendous success for me. That's not to say that I didn't have some incredibly amazing opportunities. That's not to say that I don't absolutely love my business and thrive in my business and feel like my business was what I was supposed to do with my life. Do you know what I'm saying? Money is a measure, but it's not a measure of success, and especially not a measure of worth. You get to decide what money gets to be used for you as a metric, but it does not equal worth. Got it? Okay, the other really important thing that I've learned about entrepreneurship is that it is really, really hard. It is not the easy way out of corporate America. I promise you, if you're thinking about going into entrepreneurship because it seems easier than working for somebody else, I'm telling you it's not. It's one of the most challenging things that you can ever pursue. It's also obviously immensely gratifying for those of you who have done it. Or are doing it. I'm sure you have found moments of gratification and moments of extreme anxiety. Welcome to being an entrepreneur. But one thing that I think a lot of us tend to think that is the way of success or the way that we can succeed as an entrepreneur is all about the mindset. So if you want to be a successful businesswoman, you have to focus on your mindset. What's probably getting in the way between you and making money is your mindset. What's getting in the way between you and being visible is your mindset. What's between you and what else? Like having all the dream clients that you wish that you could have is your mindset. That's kind of how the business world, the business coaching world, I should say, kind of positions how you should be thinking about your success. Is all about mindset. If you have the right mindset, your business is going to succeed. The fact of the matter is, I have yet to see a correlation between mindset and success in your business, simply because mindset is such a small part of the equation. And there's no correlation. Like there may be, okay, what am I trying to say? It's like mindset is important, yes. We need mindset work, yes. But it is a small part of the greater equation. And if we mistake mindset as the only thing that matters, we miss out on so much of what actually really will directly impact your bottom line. So let me reiterate, I'm not saying that mindset work is not important. It is important. And I do mindset work with my clients, and I do mindset work in Worthy Women Rise. Understanding how we think about things and how our thoughts create so much of how we understand the world and perceive the world is important. And there are so many other greater forces that impact the money that we come into than mindset. Privilege being one of them. Really an important metric for our success is the privilege that we carry. The marginalized identities that we carry will determine in many ways what we have to face, right, in our lives. And that will determine the challenges. That's not to say that like if you have more marginalized identities, you can't be successful. Of course not. But you're going to be faced with greater challenges that people with more privilege won't have to face. And therefore, it is easier for people with more privilege, for example, white men, to be more successful. The world is built for white men. For them, success, there's less holding them back. There's more wind at their back to support them towards success than someone with more marginalized identities, let's say a Black woman. Okay, so there's societal forces that come to play when it comes to success. That's something that we have very little control over. And we have to navigate and we have to consider how it's impacting us, and that determines our success. But the other very important element that really comes into play, whether kind of our success is is it quote unquote inevitable, or our success can be measured, is what's going on in our unconscious. You know, if we come from trauma, if we come from having very adverse childhood experiences, it's going to be more difficult for you to get out of your own way, because there's been a lot of psychological defenses built up to protect you that may now be getting in your way. I love to live and explore and be in the unconscious. That's where I thrive. And so many women who come into my group program, Worthy Women Rise, come to me believing that what's wrong with them is simply a mindset shift. And what they've come to learn through our work together is that actually it's so much deeper than our mindset shift. It's our unconscious programming and patterns. It's the ways that we have found ease in running our lives. It's actually getting in our own way. There's so much in our unconscious that actually is trying to prevent our success. And so getting to explore that, learning how to explore that, basically being given the right tool to learn how to dig into our unconscious is an instrumental part in the success of our business, of being an entrepreneur, of being a CEO, of being visible, of making money, of being self-expressive, et cetera, et cetera. To get out of our own way, to get out of people-pleasing mode, to get out of perfectionistic mode, to be able to put ourselves out there requires us to dig into our unconscious, including, for example, the worthiness wound. And that's exactly what I teach in Worthy Women Rise. So if this piques your interest, you're welcome to go to worthywomenrise.com. Doors are going to open in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. But I just want to reiterate that this idea that it's all about mindset really simplifies a complex thing. There's not one thing that's going to make you successful. I promise you, I wish it were that easy. If I could only let you know it was that easy. But there's not just that one switch, that one hack, that one mantra, that one funnel. And if you just get that, then all of your dreams will come true. Life is much more complex than that. Do not believe this oversimplification that these business coaches and that the coaching industry in general tends to spew out, because it misses the vitality, the dynamic, the complexity of the human experience, and the fact that each of us get to have such a unique and special and different entrepreneurial path. We each are going to learn so much about ourselves on this journey, and it cannot be simplified into the only thing standing in your way is a few mindset hacks. Not to say that there's not a role for mindset. It's just not the number one tool to use. It's not effective. It's not the fastest way. There's actually a more effective way, and that's digging into our programming, digging into societal pressures and childhood conditioning that has created the ways in which we understand ourselves in the world. Digging into that is so much more effective in creating a business that we can thrive in. At least that has been my experience. I invested $20,000 or $25,000 in a coach at the beginning of my business, believing that this person with this investment was going to lead me into success, into the mindset success that I wanted. But it was actually the healer that I worked with for 10 years that led me into the success that I have now, because I was unafraid to get dirty in the nitty-gritty of my shadow self. And so for all of you that are thinking about being entrepreneurs, I highly encourage you to begin to investigate your shadow self, because that is the way into your most dynamic, whole, self-expressed being that the world needs you to be. One thing I love about entrepreneurship is the immense amount of self-expression that is capable within creating our own businesses. And then what a shame for us to not use it, for us to take up space in the world because of our own fears about what it means to be who we are in the world. And that is such a disservice because we have work to do. We need you. The world needs more of us to show what is possible. And that needs to ground us in doing the uncomfortable things so that we can take up space and rise up. Okay, let me think. I wrote some notes here. If there's anything else that I missed. If you have any thoughts for me about how this episode landed for you, I would love to hear it. You're welcome to message me on Instagram. I'm at I am Thais Sky. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear if this resonated with you, your thoughts about this. For all of you entrepreneurs, I'm celebrating you. I'm cheering you on. This is not easy shit. It really requires us to get uncomfortable and go onto this spiritual journey in such a powerful way. And so I'm celebrating all of you. If you're dabbling in entrepreneurship, I'm right there with you. I dabbled for a long time before I fully committed. You're allowed to dabble. And also, we don't have to turn and monetize everything. We're allowed to also have hobbies. So if you're thinking about like wanting to be a coach or wanting to sell something on Etsy, also just know that you don't have to monetize it for it to be legitimate and for it to be real. Sometimes it's powerful to just have a hobby. Sometimes it's powerful to just have a side business, a side hustle, and like not have it be your full-time thing. That's also allowed. We are allowed to find what works for us in our lives. And full-time entrepreneur is not for everybody. And I remember when I first moved to LA, I really, really believed, because I was taking this leap and I had to believe for myself that entrepreneur was the way, the only way. And now I know better. I know that entrepreneur is the way for some people, but it's not for all of us. And that doesn't make you broken or different or wrong. It just makes you you. And whatever you find is your way is the way for you. And that needs to be celebrated. We all get to live our lives the best way that works for us. That's the invitation, to find a life that works for us, that makes us thrive. And that is going to be your own unique, special blend of who you are. It's not going to be found through anyone else's path. And I know that that's a little cliche, but it's also very, very true. Okay, so celebrating all of you, no matter where you are on the journey. Thank you for being with me. I hope that this resonates with you. I'm sending you all of my love, and I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.